Imagine the scene. Entire deserts transformed into metallic graveyards, rows of Boeing 747s resting under the scorching sun, their windows covered in dust and fuselages marked by time. Headlines around the world pronounced the sentence, "The end of the Queen of the Skies is near." To the lay public, it seemed like just another natural cycle of aviation. Planes get old, new models take their place, and technology moves forward. But for engineers, pilots, and enthusiasts, those images carried a devastating symbolic weight. It was as if humanity were giving up not just an airplane, but an entire era in which flying represented status, adventure, and grandeur. The economic logic seemed relentless. 4 fuel-guzzling engines no longer had a place in a world where every drop of kerosene meant millions more dollars on the balance sheet. Twin-engine jets like the 777 and the A350 promised to cross oceans with half the consumption and simplified maintenance. The verdict seemed final. The 747 had fulfilled its historic role and was now ceding its space to efficient machines. What few realized, however, is that decreeing the death of an icon is rarely as simple as it seems. The error lay in the confusion between efficiency and strategic relevance. It's true that the 747 had lost ground on passenger routes, but its engineering held something that twin-engine jets could not replace. While emotional headlines spoke of farewell flights, a silent renaissance was beginning to take shape. In discreet hangars and logistics meetings, cargo carriers saw the 747 as an irreplaceable platform, capable of transporting volumes and shapes that no other commercial aircraft dared to accommodate. Its nose door, unique in its class, turned the loading process into an engineering spectacle. Entire trucks, industrial turbines, helicopters, and even boats could slide into its elevated fuselage. What the market saw as a waste of fuel, operators saw as unparalleled versatility. What appeared to be a definitive retirement in practice became a change of stage, from the glamorous limelight of international passenger flights to the more discreet but absolutely vital world of global cargo. And it was precisely on this new stage that the 747 showed its resilience. While other models vanished from commercial fleets without leaving a deep mark, the Jumbo found a second life, far from the spotlight, but at the beating heart of the world economy. Few remember, for example, that aircraft once considered young, like the MD-11 or even early variants of the 777, have already ceased production and significant operation. The 747, on the other hand, continued to grow in strategic importance, transporting everything from vital medical supplies to highly complex military operations. What for many was an epitaph turned out to be a new beginning. The Queen of the Skies did not die. She simply changed her throne. In 2020, when the world stood still, runways fell silent as never before. Planes, that for decades had been the symbol of globalization, were grounded in endless lines, covered in plastic and surrounded by silence. Commercial aviation, which until then had seemed indestructible, suffered a sudden collapse. Borders closed, routes were cancelled, and billions of passengers stopped flying overnight. It was in this desolate landscape that a familiar figure, almost forgotten and considered retired, rose again from the deserts, the Boeing 747, the Queen of the Skies, which many, already considered a museum piece, took on an unexpected new role. No longer as a stage for glamorous travel or a symbol of power, but as the protagonist of a global emergency airlift. The irony was stark. The very plane that so many airlines had rushed to remove from their passenger fleets would, in a few short months, become the vital link that kept the planet breathing. Literally, the technical detail that made all the difference had been present since its design in the 1960s, the 747, freighter's unique nose door. This innovation, which once served to move gigantic industrial loads, now became the secret weapon against the crisis. Vaccines, ventilators, tons of masks, and medical supplies that needed to cross oceans found an immediate solution in the 747. While the latest generation twin-engine jets remained grounded, with no profitable routes to justify their flights, the Jumbos were hastily called back into service. Airlines scrambled to convert passenger planes into makeshift freighters, removing seats and adapting cabins in an attempt to meet a seemingly infinite demand. But the ready-to-go 747-400F and 747-8F models took to the front lines. carrying out missions that went beyond commercial transport. They were rescue flights, bridges of life connecting continents in a time of unprecedented collapse. The cultural impact of this return was profound. For generations who had bid farewell to the Queen of the Skies in emotional, last flights, seeing her once, again cutting through the skies laden with vaccines, was like witnessing a retired hero returning to action for their noblest mission. Pilots who once flew tourists in luxurious cabins now guided tons of hope, often on discreet, unglamorous night flights, but with an incomparable historical weight. The 747, which had first united the world in the 1970s, repeated the feat half a century later, under very different circumstances, but with the same spirit: to be the bridge between lives separated by distance. And perhaps it has never been clearer that the Queen of the Skies was not just a four-engine machine, but a resilient symbol of how aviation, in its most difficult moments, always finds a way to reinvent itself. At first glance, the 747-8F could be mistaken for just another freighter. But anyone who delves into the role it plays in the global economy quickly realizes that we are dealing with a true flying fortress, a titan disguised as a commercial aircraft. The 747-8F is not just a plane that carries boxes. It is a logistical link that sustains entire international supply chains. Unlike other freighters, its volumetric capacity is so extraordinary that it allows for the loading of complete trucks, helicopters, and even small boats all at once. In a world increasingly dependent on global production chains, this ability is irreplaceable. Imagine entire factories waiting for machinery that can only be delivered on time if it fits inside the jumbo's immense belly. No other freighter in operation has the combination of range, capacity, and reliability that the 747-8F delivers daily. For years, it was believed that modern twin-engine jets, like the 777F, would gradually replace the Queen of the Skies in the cargo sector as well. But this reasoning ignored a simple reality. It's not just about tons of cargo, but about the shape and logistics involved. While the more efficient twins carry conventional pallets and containers, the 747 offers the possibility of accommodating what we call outsize cargo, unwieldy, irregularly shaped loads that simply do not fit in other planes. That is why, even in the era of green twins, companies like UPS, Atlas Air, and Cargolux not only kept their jumbos, but expanded their fleets. The strategic error of those who decreed the end of the 747 was in believing that fuel efficiency would be the only relevant criterion in modern aviation. In practice, global demand showed the opposite. There are missions so grand that only Boeing's winged giant can accomplish them. What is most fascinating is that the 747-8F, launched at a time when many considered four-engine aviation obsolete, managed to reinvent its role with authority. It does not compete directly with the 777F or the A350F. It occupies a superior, almost untouchable niche where no competitor dares to enter. Every flight of a 747-8F is, in practice, a strategic operation that keeps the gears of world trade turning. From transporting humanitarian aid in areas devastated by natural disasters to sending ultra-sensitive equipment for space and military programs, its presence is so crucial that it becomes invisible, like the essential infrastructure of a city that we only notice when it's gone. Thus, while the general public may think the 747 has disappeared, the reality is that the giant remains more active than ever. It has simply traded the runway of luxurious airports for the vital backstage of global logistics. Few airplanes carry within them not only cargo or passengers, but the very symbolic weight of world power. The Boeing 747 achieved this status when it was chosen as the platform for Air Force One, the presidential aircraft of the United States. The decision to use the jumbo was not just technical, though its range, internal space, and reliability were unparalleled at the time, but also political and symbolic. By boarding a 747, American presidents sent a clear message to the world. The United States led not only in the military and economic fields, but also in engineering and aviation. The iconic image of the blue and white plane touching down on official visits became a diplomatic spectacle in itself, transforming the jumbo into a flying extension of the White House. More than an airplane, it became a stage for historic negotiations, where decisions that changed the course of international politics were made at thousands of feet in the air. But the 747's role in global power extends beyond the elegant protocol of Air Force One. There is a darker, little-known version, the E-4B Nightwatch, often nicknamed the Doomsday Plane. This militarized variant of the 747 was designed during the Cold War to fulfill an unimaginable role, to maintain the continuity of the US government in the event of a nuclear attack. Equipped with communications resistant to electromagnetic pulses, redundant systems, and extended endurance, the E-4B is essentially an indestructible aerial command center. Its mission is to ensure that, even in the worst-case scenario, the country continues to have operational leadership and response capability. Though rarely seen in public, its mere existence reinforces the 747's role as much more than a transport vehicle. It is a strategic platform, a flying throne from which the world could be governed amidst chaos. This geopolitical aspect of the jumbo is not limited to the United States. Governments of other countries also adopted variants of the 747 to transport delegations, outfitting them like true flying palaces. The reason goes beyond comfort. It is about status, about showing the world that the nation has global reach and presence. At international summits, when a presidential 747 touches the ground, it commands immediate respect. It is a projection of power that goes far beyond words. Thus, while in the collective imagination the jumbo may be remembered for Pan Am flights and cabins with pianos in the 1970s, behind the scenes of world politics, it remains a strategic asset. The 747 thus proves that some airplanes are not just machines. They are symbols of power, diplomacy, and survival. If there is one airplane that can be called the chameleon of the skies, it is the Boeing 747. Over more than 5 decades, it has made it clear that it would not be limited to the role of a simple passenger or cargo transport. Its versatility has allowed for reinventions ranging from the world of music to space science. Who could imagine, for example, that a 4-engine giant would be transformed into the stage for a world tour? Yet that is exactly what Iron Maiden did, using a 747-400, affectionately nicknamed Ed Force One, to transport not only the band, but also tons of concert equipment in a logistical feat that blended musical spectacle with aeronautical power. This is just one of the many faces the Queen of the Skies has assumed throughout history, each one reinforcing her aura as a living legend. Other reinventions border on the audacious. Qantas, for example, transformed one of its 747s into a flying canvas for art, painting its fuselage with designs inspired by Australian Aboriginal culture, creating a cultural icon that transcended air travel. Even more impressive was the jumbo's adaptation for fighting forest fires. The 747 supertanker, equipped with gigantic tanks of water and fire retardant, became a vital tool in battles against devastating wildfires in the United States and other countries. Imagine the scene: an aircraft designed to cross oceans with hundreds of passengers, now diving into valleys and mountains to dump tons of water on burning areas. This image alone encapsulates the project's extraordinary capacity for adaptation. But perhaps the most fascinating reinventions occurred behind the scientific and technological scenes. NASA transformed 747s into flying laboratories, as in the case of SOFIA, an astronomical observatory equipped with an infrared telescope that opened windows to the study of the universe, literally, from the sky. Other units were adapted to test experimental engines, serving as safe platforms to validate new technologies that would later equip commercial and military aircraft. Looking at this mosaic of uses, we realize that the most common mistake was to believe that the 747 was limited to passengers or cargo. In fact, each reinvention not only prolonged its relevance, but also reinforced its identity as a true heritage of aviation, an airplane with 1,000 faces, capable of adapting to missions that no other would dare to take on. And perhaps it is precisely this plasticity that ensures its cultural immortality. No icon escapes the pressures of time, and for the 747, the great contemporary dilemma is environmental. In a world increasingly dominated by emission reduction targets, sustainability commitments, and strict regulations, the jumbo carries the burden of its 4 engines. The roar that once symbolized power and safety is now interpreted by many as a waste of fuel compared to modern twin-engine jets. For critics, this characteristic would seal its definitive retirement. But this reading ignores that in aviation, immediate efficiency is not always the only determining factor. The 747 has proven on other occasions that its relevance transcends the mathematics of consumption. And now, facing the ecological dilemma, it once again finds itself at the center of a debate that blends technological progress and cultural memory. Behind the technical scenes, engineers and operators have not simply watched the slow farewell. Experiments with sustainable aviation fuels, known as SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, have shown that the 747 can significantly reduce its emissions without losing the capability that makes it irreplaceable. Aerodynamic retrofits, engine improvements, and lighter systems have also been implemented in some units, extending the model's operational life. The common mistake is to believe that its retirement will come solely because of CO2. The truth is that governments and cargo carriers have seen strategic value in keeping the jumbo flying, investing in modernizations and adaptations rather than hastily discarding it. After all, when it comes to transporting emergency equipment, military cargo, or large-scale humanitarian missions, the environmental equation is just one part of a much broader picture. And here, an inevitable reflection arises. The 747 is, in a way, a mirror of the human dilemma between progress and memory. It represents the constant tension between the need to innovate and the desire to preserve. For the generations that grew up seeing its imposing silhouette against the sunset, it is not just about efficiency, but about cultural identity. The jumbo's ecological dilemma is not just about engines and kerosene, but about society's very ability to balance the past and the future. Perhaps one day it will truly disappear from commercial skies, but until then, its presence continues to remind us that some machines are much more than figures on a spreadsheet. They are living testaments to human ambition. Looking at the trajectory of the 747, we notice a fascinating irony. Many younger planes, designed decades after it, have already disappeared completely, while the queen of the skies continues to fly. Models like the DC-10, the L-1011 TriStar, the Concorde, and even the more recent A380 had remarkable careers, but they did not withstand the test of time like the Jumbo. What seemed to be an epitaph in the deserts of Arizona turned out to be just a transitional chapter. The myth that the end of production would mean the end of relevance was disproven in practice. The 747 remains indispensable, whether as a freighter, a presidential plane, a scientific laboratory, or a military platform. It is no longer the luxurious stage of 1970s Pan Am flights, but its essence remains to be the bridge that connects worlds, whether in times of economic expansion or in moments of global crisis. Behind this resilience lies something that transcends numbers and technical specifications, the human dimension. Pilots, engineers, mechanics, and crews who have dedicated their careers to the 747 continue to fight to keep it alive, not just for function, but out of pride. Many describe the experience of flying the Jumbo as being in command of a true cathedral of the skies, majestic, imposing, and yet surprisingly docile. Passengers who once flew on it hold memories of journeys that were not just trips but events. Boarding a 747 had a special aura: the exclusive upper deck, the spacious cabins, the roar of the four engines at takeoff. This collective memory fuels the perception that the 747 is not just an airplane, but an emotional link between generations of aviators and travelers. And perhaps this is the Queen's greatest lesson: icons do not disappear, they just change their function. The 747 survived because it knew how to reinvent itself, finding new stages to remain relevant. From Mao, a symbol of mass tourism, to a titan of global logistics, from a presidential salon to a scientific laboratory, it shows us that aviation is not made only of economic calculations, but also of symbols, emotion, and legacy. When we think about sustainability, innovation, and the future, it is inevitable to reflect on how to balance efficiency and memory, progress and identity. Perhaps one day the last 747 will be retired from service, but its soul will continue to fly in every modern aircraft that inherited its audacity. And now I turn the question back to you. Have you ever flown on the 747? What was your experience with the Queen of the Skies?